LBC. From Global, leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, it's day 3 of the debate, the endless debate that is going on in the House of Commons. 2 more days to go, and of course that critical, crucial vote expected at about 7 p.m. next Tuesday. And I'm wondering, are you suffering from Brexit fatigue? Have you had enough of it all? Do you want to just see an end to it? I think there are people moving towards that position, and I'm sure there are people. I called a taxi up here tonight, and the cabbie said to me, Nigel, he said I was a Remainer. He said, but you know what? The way they've treated us, the arrogance of these people, I would be a Leaver next time. And equally, there are some Leavers who, seeing the way Mrs May's handled this, now think it might just be simpler if we were to stay. And there are some out there, of course, who think that maybe a second referendum would solve all of this. Although, if we're suffering from Brexit fatigue, I wonder whether that wouldn't just give us a bit more of it. Maybe I'm misreading the mood. I don't know. And 1 or 2 more machinations today, including a parliamentary resignation. No, not from UKIP, though there have been resignations from UKIP today, and there are more to come tomorrow, but from the Liberal Democrats, would you believe? MP Stephen Lloyd, he's a Lib Dem MP for Eastbourne. He has today resigned the Liberal Democrat whip because, as he said in a letter today to his constituents, he promised he would support the deal the PM brought back from Brussels and not back calls for a second referendum, keeping my word to the town. So that's what he put in his election literature last year. I mean, look, I think Mrs May's deal is awful. It would get us out of the European Union, and Stephen Lloyd feels that's the only way he can honour his promise to his constituents. As much as I loathe the deal, I have to say I rather applaud Stephen Lloyd for doing that, I really do. And Theresa May's come up with a wheeze for how she thinks she might get this vote through. She's given a signal that a piece of legislation could be put in that would give MPs the power to decide whether they wanted to go into the backstop. But I'm not sure that works, Mrs May, because the point about Brexit is that we wanted to leave the European institutions, not to have the opportunity to sink into them even more deeply and possibly, given the legal judgment, indefinitely. So tell me, has Brexit fatigue, has it changed your view? Were you a Brexiteer who's now a Remainer, or vice versa? Call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you just want Mrs May's deal to simply go through. You've had enough of the whole thing, even though you know it's a rotten deal. Something I think she's been rather relying on. If that's how you feel, text to 84850. And come on, tell me, would a second referendum end Brexit fatigue, end this constant debate that is going on? Would a second referendum solve anything? I'm not so sure that it would. If you think it would, let me know. Please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC, at LBC, and of course Facebookers, you can comment there too. Let's get straight to the callers. Let's see how much fatigue there is out there. Let's go to Torquay. Speak to David, a new caller. Good evening, David.
Very good evening to you, Nigel.
So, are you fatigued by Brexit?
Oh, very much so. Been fatigued with it now since the start of the process.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is right from word go, whilst everyone is talking about currency union or customs union or all this sort of thing, nobody has ever come near the military union or the military unification aspect.
Oh.
And this is being held out of Brexit. And this is a vital part of what's been going on with May's deal right from the word go, during and prior. It's woven all the way through her deal, and it's cloaked in cloaked EU language. And I feel that we're almost going to need Keir Starmer to have another humble address to get the lid off it and actually include the British military, Her Majesty's Armed Service, into Brexit, that we must leave with our military, because at the moment, Nigel, we are not.
Well, David, I have talked about this, as you know, ever since I had that debate with Nick Clegg on LBC back in 2014. When he called me a dangerous fantasist because there'd never be a European army. And then we saw the other day, David, you may have seen the picture, 3rd Battalion Parachute Regiment.
Correct. Yes. Well, it was my company that pushed that out into the public to get it leaked.
Okay, well done you.
The mainstream were not doing anything with it.
Okay, well
the other thing we've discovered today is that at Royal Navy Nuclear Deterrent Headquarters in Northwood is an EU military crisis centre with a direct secure comms link back to Brussels. Now, all the while, David Cameron and May have been saying that they're going to veto the HQ. It already exists at Royal Navy HQ.
Do you think, David, if there was a second referendum and the public became more aware of what the implications of a EU army are, that it would bolster the Brexiteer cause?
It would do, but we need to use the right terms of reference. It's military unification, and this is where it concerns
Okay, all right.
British
So
people.
you're not actually fatigued by Brexit. You want us to know more about it.
We need the detail, and the general public, if they wholeheartedly knew about military unification,
David,
they would support.
David, I couldn't agree more. One of the reasons I flagged it. Thank you. Stephen on Facebook says, yes, I'm bored. Just leave now. And that's what the Prime Minister, I think, is banking on. But the question is, Stephen, do we leave on WTO or May's deal? Ross says, becoming more of a leaver as time passes. Up to Stoke-on-Trent to speak to Sam, a new caller. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Hi, Nigel.
So, how do you feel about it?
No, I'll tell you what I'm tired of, mate. I'm tired of the establishment stitching. I think you've done great things for Brexit, getting a referendum, but you need to stress that more. I've watched interviews, and what they're trying to do is frame the debate saying, look, Brexit can't be done when it's a stitch-up. Starting with David Cameron, who basically forbid the civil service from making plans for a leave vote.
Yep, no plan
Then
B.
he resigned.
Yep.
That put us how far behind the clock. Then May just ran down the clock, and I think she lost that general election on purpose. But she has always been in charge. And like you said yourself, someone who actually believes in it, who can play hardball, who says, right, okay, we'll just leave. Look at the way Donald Juncker went running to America.
Oh, well, Sam, that's how you negotiate.
Yeah, because they know will do it.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
To death.
Yeah.
And I think you need to make more of this because they're trying to. I mean, David Davis was totally sidelined. That Checkers deal written by that Ollie Robbins. I mean, if that isn't ironic, I don't know what it is.
Well, do you know, Sam? Do you know, Sam? I've been watching a lot of this debate in the House of Commons over the course of the last 3 days. I'm going to say this: the standard of most of our MPs now is pitiful. Do you know they stand up, Sam, and they literally read word for word something that's been written for them by a researcher. It is absolutely pathetic. And I thought to myself,
they're all the same people, like you say, Nigel.
Yeah, and I thought, how many of this lot?
Working class. That's why I think that if this basically could turn into France, I think, because if they disregard the referendum, that is breaking the democratic pact. And I'm sorry, now, you're not for it, yourself, just be calm and argue, but no, because like the poll tax, remember the poll tax?
Sam, I do understand. I saw a letter in Telegraph today, chap saying, where do I get a yellow jacket from? And I completely understand that, Sam, if and when the cards fall, and we know where we are with all of this, then there's only one way that we can prevent people from taking to the streets, from taking direct action, and that's to make sure there is a respectable political vehicle they can get behind. And that, Sam, is why democracy works. It works because we don't need to riot and protest because we can win through the ballot box. But I do understand what you're saying, and I'm deeply concerned about it. Sam, thank you for that, and thank you very much for your passion. Martin says, I can't get you, EU, out of my head. A play on a song by Kylie Minogue, Can't Get You Out of My Head. Thanks for that, Martin. Tony quite rightly says, the Brexit debate will continue long after March 2019 as well. And it will, Tony. And the funny thing is, Tony, Brexit is not Mr. Juncker's biggest headache. Because at this summit next week, 13th, 14th of December, whilst Brexit's going to be a big part of it, there's a far bigger part of it, and that is called Italy, where the Italians have put forward a budget, a perfectly reasonable budget, to be told by the unelected bureaucrats, no, it's no good, you must reduce it. And the Italians are basically saying, go to hell. So it's going to be a big showdown between Italy and the Commission next week. So, with all this Brexit fatigue, has it changed your view? Going to go to Cormac, who's calling from Kilkenny in Ireland, a new caller. Good evening, Cormac.
Hi, Nigel. Good evening.
So, looking at it from the Republic, are we looking a bit silly in the UK?
No, and I mean, I'm coming from kind of a unique perspective. I spent 17 years living and working in England between 1999 and 2016. I've been campaigning against our membership of the fledgling United States of Europe since I was 14 in 1986.
Wow.
Even back to when I said exactly what I said on the tin, this thing called the Single European Act came along. And I seem to be in a minority of one in my secondary school, trying to have debates in the debating society on it, and only to be told, no, we don't debate things like that. I was as recently as last Tuesday in the, would you believe it, the Europe Direct's National Soapbox Competition, which is an annual love-in the EU Commission has in Ireland competition.
They're good at that.
And there in the middle of it all is me, the regional finalist winner from my region of Ireland, and I was almost wheeled into the room like Hannibal Lecter on a sack trolley, my God, they'd never been that close to one before. But I mean, in 33 years, Nigel, I've seen a recurring pattern over and over again. I saw with Denmark in 1992 where, little country, the Monty Python vote comes down, vote again.
Yep.
I've seen it in my own country twice. Disgracefully.
Just, Cormac, just for those listeners that don't know this history, just spell out what's happened twice in Ireland in the last 20 years.
In 2001, we rejected the Nice Treaty.
In a referendum?
In a referendum, in a legally binding referendum, because we have a written constitution in Ireland called One Rock and a Heron, and in order to do anything further integrating into the EU, it must be met with a majority.
So you said no to the treaty, so that was the end of it, Cormac, surely?
No. And I knew it was coming within seconds.
Yeah.
The same old cliches were trotted out. We're in uncharted territory. We're in, we might need to revisit this again. Whenever anybody from the EU was asked for their opinion on, well, this is a matter for the Irish people. But they were, they were quite, they bombarded the country with...
So they forced you to vote again. They forced you to vote again. And then it happened again, didn't it?
It happened again in 2008 with the Lisbon Treaty, or the EU Constitution Mark II, which is interesting the way France and Hungary dealt with. They're considered big boys. We'll stop the ratification process immediately, but we'll just read. I mean, I actually am one of these saddles that sits down and reads. But I don't get my.
Cormac, given that you have seen, and you're an Irish Eurosceptic, you've twice seen your people vote against European treaties in a referendum and then be made to vote again and vote yes. Do you fear that's what could happen with the UK?
I've been saying it since D-Day +1 in 2016, because it will be on a larger scale. They can't do to you what they did to us, because you're a much bigger country. You've got a lot more buying power, a lot more spending power.
But the way
it's going to, sorry Nigel, the way it's going to go is that they will wheedle in a second referendum. If they go ahead with the vote next week, which is doubtful, they'll go ahead with the vote. If they get defeated, we may need to revisit this. And the choice you will have on your ballot paper is, accept the deal and leave the EU, or remain in the EU. If there has to be a referendum, if there absolutely has to be one, that it should be accept the deal and leave the EU, or reject the deal and leave on the WTO terms. But
we won't get that. Cormac, great perspective, and I think very interesting for a lot of people who don't follow EU affairs. Cormac made the point. Denmark once, Ireland twice, referendum results the EU didn't want, people forced to vote again, and then they got the answer they wanted. They think they can do that to us. I think if they try, they're in for a surprise. You're listening to Nigel Farage on LBC. It's now 16 minutes past 6, and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Have you had problems with your telephone today? Because O2 are investigating with a high priority the fact that many of its data services have been out of action, with tens of millions of users affected. So if you're with O2 or a customer for a company that uses their infrastructure, you may have had a tough time. They're saying that it's their internet services mostly that are affected. But let me tell you, I'm with O2, and actually for much of the day, I've not been able to receive just normal texts, and even making phone calls. I've been just off air for most of the day. So it may have been a very difficult day for many of you. You're not on your own. I know Eddie Mayer said, if you've had a problem with your phone, please call my show. Please don't. It's very sweet of you, Eddie. Thank you. Now, in the House of Commons today, the real star of the show to inspire us all was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond. And this is what he had to say about the deal on offer.
This deal is the best deal to exit the EU that is available or that is going to be available. The idea that there is an option of renegotiating at the 11th hour is simply a delusion.
That's it, chaps. We can't do any better for you. This is it. That didn't inspire me very much. And here he was talking about the prospects of leaving on World Trade Organization rules.
To make the case for rejecting the calls, both of those who would prefer to plunge the country into the uncertainty and economic self-harm of no deal,
how awful,
and of those who would seek to undo the referendum decision, and in doing so fuel a narrative of betrayal which would undermine the broad consent on which our democratic politics is based.
It's enough to get you reaching for the drinks cabinet, isn't it? I mean, it is doom and gloom. It is depressing. It is awful. He is the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Can't we please have some inspiring leadership? Well, not from this mob. And I do wonder whether that has led to an increasing sense of fatigue. So I'm asking you, has Brexit fatigue changed your point of view? Shirley in Birmingham says, I'm fatigued and I'm angry. I get the feeling that Juncker and his friends are laughing at us. It makes my blood boil. May also has this effect on me. But it all makes me more determined to get what we voted for. On Twitter, John says, yes, I've had enough. We should just leave. And there is a growing body of opinion, John, that says that, and it's very interesting. Of the Brexiteers, the people who voted Brexit, now a very big majority just want to leave. They don't want a deal because what they see is that the EU will trap us inside something that's as bad or perhaps even worse than EU membership. John is calling from Maidstone and there's a new caller. Welcome, John.
Hi there, thank you for my call. Yeah, I'm actually motivated by this whole thing because I'm not fatigued by it. I'm actually motivated because I voted to leave the EU. I voted to leave because not subject to a deal, not subject to EU permission. I voted to leave the EU. That was the choice I was given. And actually what's happening is it looks as though it's going in a direction that's not going to work like that or exactly like that. And so that actually motivates me to if it came to a vote where we left on WTO rules, or if there was another option, maybe even in a general election, that actually motivates me to, go against.
All right, so you feel really strongly about this, and it's fascinating. But if Lord Adonis was here, John, he'd say, but you didn't know which deal you were voting for.
Well, exactly. So I was given the option to either vote to leave the EU, as it currently is, or to remain in the EU, as it currently is. And so I voted to leave for exactly what I've pointed out. Now, I wanted to say something, a couple of more things. Do the people that voted to remain understand what they voted to remain in?
Nope.
That's a good question.
No, John, it was given as the status quo. Nothing will ever change. And since then, we've seen the calls for a European army, the calls for a foreign policy without veto, and the imposition of a finance minister to have power above national governments. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
That brings me on to my next point in terms of what the previous callers have said about, well, as somebody said about, we have a vote in the UK where if we don't like something with our UK Parliament has done, we can vote against that. Now, what you just mentioned about the EU Parliament there, how do I vote against any of that?
It's very difficult, isn't it? Absolutely.
Exactly. If the EU wanted to say to the UK, okay, we need 100, let's just say 20,000 of your troops to join the EU army. How do I vote against that?
Here's the problem, John. Mrs. Maydeal keeps us trapped in the whole thing. John, thank you. And John, not fatigued, but motivated. George says, I was a leaver 10 years ago. I'm even more of a leaver today. Let's get out on WTO rules. Ian says, we need to put an end to it. Thanks, Nigel, for this mess. How about an apology to Britain? Ian, I'm not going to apologise to Britain for Mrs. May's dishonesty and bungling of the whole Brexit process. A proper leader, this would have been done and dusted by now. And Tom in Bromley says, I'm not suffering from Brexit fatigue, but rather Brexit exasperation. Tom, that may well have been a better word to use. I'm off to Reading to speak to Murad. Good evening.
Hello there. Good evening, Mr. Farage.
So, are you fatigued or motivated?
Oh, man, I'm sick to the back teeth of the whole Brexit business, you know. I've just had enough. Every channel I turn on, every radio channel, everything, and no one actually gives proper answers. It's like the whole thing has been extremely vague, convoluted. It is just intended, I think it is intended to be that way, so we don't make the correct decision that's best for us. Now, Mrs. May, you know, I've seen her on an interview on This Morning Show, and she was talking about the things that she got for us. You know, we can trade with whichever country we want. We have freedom of movement, you know. Exactly. Now, I'm thinking to myself, what did we actually give them? That's why it's not been asked. What did we give them in that negotiation? Now, I've heard that we can trade with other countries, but only if the EU allows us to, or agrees to that sort of rule.
Murad, the truth is, this was in two parts, right? One is the withdrawal agreement, where we commit to a large sum of money to staying in a customs union with potentially being trapped in a backstop indefinitely.
Yeah.
When she talks about all the wonderful things that may happen in the future, that is a political declaration of what we might get between now and the end of 2022 as a result of negotiations. None of it's guaranteed, and she dishonestly presents it to the country as if all of this is a done deal. And
exactly, and I think that is the problem. You see, the way she came about it, like, freedom of movement, we can do what we like, we have control. But yet, every single politician, a lot of them, all of them oppose such deal. If it's such a wonderful thing and it gives us everything we actually wanted, why is everyone against it? Why can she not be more open and honest about it?
Well,
that's what I'm sick of.
No, do you know what, so am I? It's the dishonesty of the way she puts her position that absolutely does my head in. Murad, thank you very much indeed for your call. Stan says, the thing is, if there was a second referendum and 17.4 million people voted to leave, then what? Well, then what? They would not like it, and Tony Blair would call for a third referendum, and he'd be backed up by Sir Nick Clegg and no doubt the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And Stan, maybe the real answer to this is we need a new political party, because the Conservative Party can't deliver Brexit. A Labour government wouldn't deliver it either. Let's go to Harry in Wimbledon, a new caller. Hi, Harry.
Hi, Nigel. I'm finding your show very interesting. I'm also tired of everything, but I think I'm tired for different reasons. I'm quite tired of hearing all the people say this doesn't work, but without giving any sort of solutions. All the Jacob Rees-Moggs and Boris Johnson saying, "Oh, this is rubbish, this is rubbish," but I haven't heard any solutions. I haven't heard anybody, and to be fair, neither from you, I haven't heard anybody turn around and say, "This is what we should be doing and what it's going to look like."
Well, Harry, perhaps you don't listen very often, I don't know. But
I listen every day.
Well, I've been saying that actually for 25 years I've wanted a simple free trade deal and not membership of political union. That in modern parlance would be would be Canada Plus. So 25 years I've campaigned for that. I couldn't have been clearer. Given that time is running out and March the 29th approaching, the most practical, sensible thing to do now, Harry, is to leave on WTO terms and wait for them to come running after us.
I think that's dangerous. I think that's because we have no idea what that looks like. Now, I have to say...
Well, hang on, Harry. We know exactly what it looks like. When you go out...
Nigel,
and I can hear you've got a coughing child in the background.
I do. She's sleeping, but she's coughing.
When you go out and buy her Christmas presents, most of them will come in from countries who are not part of the European Union, and they'll be on WTO rules. Harry, we're out of time. I wish we weren't. I really do. You listen to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:30 and time for the news with Lisa Rizzi. Well, I'm asking you whether you've got Brexit fatigue, but actually, no, you're telling me you've got exasperation. In fact, Michael on Facebook says, I'm not fatigued, I'm livid. So it seems there's a bit, perhaps less, Brexit fatigue amongst LBC listeners than perhaps I had thought. Other news today, stock markets. The FTSE down to 6,700, down a further 3 points today. The stock markets have been having a very, very rough time. You will, no doubt, in the next 24, 48 hours hear that this is all happening because of, you've guessed it, Brexit. It's all because of Brexit, but actually the truth of it is the German stock market fell by exactly the same amount, the Hong Kong stock market by a similar amount, and the American stock market by a similar amount. They're all down about 3% today. Folks, we have had 9 years of rising stock markets and steady growth. Maybe not as high as we'd like in this country, but steady growth. And we're going into a downturn. I have no doubt about that at all. The establishment will try and blame it on Brexit, but actually this is a trend that is happening across much of the Western world. Difficult for those who've got, pensions, annuities due to come up, but that's the way it is. Markets can't keep going up forever. I know, I used to work in them. And on text I get, Nigel, I often feel like giving up and accepting the EU. Well, Rob, there are some I'm sure who would give it up, but the impression I get is that most leavers feel pretty angry and really want this almost more than ever. Not heard from many Remainers tonight. 0345 6060 973. Are you fatigued by Brexit, or do you think, if you're a Remainer, do you think that actually in a way, you might just be winning. Let's go to John in South Wales, a new caller to the show. Good evening, John.
Hi, Nigel. I'd just like to congratulate my fellow countryman Cormac, who spoke well.
Yes.
I'd just like to add to that a reminder about the banking crisis in 2008, where the Irish people were asked to borrow against themselves another 64 billion to pay out monies that originated in German banks.
That was NAMA, wasn't it? It was called, yeah.
They had NAMA. So the Irish people now, they've kicked the debts into the long grass, but their grandchildren will have to pay it. The other thing I'd like to say in terms of the vote now and the problems in Parliament now, it's simple to me. The 2016 referendum was a result that has to be upheld. The 2017 general election held out politicians who are now in Westminster who stood on a manifesto pledge they would implement the 2016 referendum, and they've done the opposite, and the only way out of it, as I see it, is that the Queen dissolves Parliament.
But, John, OK, listen, I get your point, and by the way...
So uphold the Constitution.
By the way, getting back to Ireland briefly, you know, the price that Ireland paid for joining the euro has, as you say, it's going to be generations on repaying that massive bailing out of French and German banks. John, if the Queen dissolves Parliament and we have fresh elections, would that actually solve anything, given the two parties?
It would give us the chance to democratically test and choose what MPs we have in the House of Commons.
But isn't the problem, John, there isn't much difference between them, really?
We don't have to vote for main political parties that have lied to us before in the hope that they won't lie to us again.
Well,
okay. Our local MPs,
hope springs eternal.
Test them out locally.
Hope springs eternal. But, John, if we did that, you know, what would we do about the deal? Because we'd run out of time.
Well, the out of time is the fault of the EU. The EU got together with the Irish government, went on about the hard border. There is a border in Ireland already. It's quite hard. If you're driving the wrong vehicle with the wrong fuel in it, either side of the border, and you're stopped and they do a dipstick test in your tank, you get a £2,000 fine. There's all sorts of people in customs and police watching smuggling.
Well, of course, because of different excise duties. Yeah.
But the border we're talking about in terms of a hard border is the idea mistaken in the public eye that a hard border is somehow like the old security border when the terrorists were going. In fact, it's a border the Irish government's friends, the EU, want to impose, a trade border, and it doesn't need to be there, because if we had a trade deal in the first place, we could have had it.
Absolutely, John, you're right. Absolutely, completely right. Thank you very much indeed. Well, John thinks the way out is the Queen dissolves Parliament. Not sure it'll solve a thing. Now, all new callers so far, but Rupert in Maidenhead has called before. Good evening, Rupert.
Hello, Nigel. It's your Rupert the Ramona in Maidenhead.
I know. It's very good to have you back on. Very good to have you back on.
Here we go. I won't forget that. Right. So, I spoke to you about a year ago, and I'd like to quote a passage from what you said to me. You said, Rupert, you're a Remainer, and you're a Remainer, and I'm a Leaver, and we're both going to end up unhappy. And we couldn't be more true a year on. So there are three things we got to do now. You've got to listen to the whole thing, because you're going to jump at me. Right,
I promise I'll bite my lip, all right?
Great stuff. Right, so the first thing that needs to happen, we need to have another referendum.
Right, go on.
Right, but this time, Nigel, it's the follow-up that's key. So, Labour and the Conservative Cabinet will then reform. And if, let's say, the country votes to leave again, a Labour and Conservative cabinet cannot have... if you voted to remain, you can't be in that cabinet. So you have a cabinet full of full of Leavers or Remainers. Then they have an election. And then Labour can rock up with their soft Brexit, the Conservatives can rock up with the hard Brexit, and then we can get on with it. But more importantly, it's the other way, because I promise you now, Nigel, I'm a hard Remainer, and I believe passionately that... You know, we need to be engaging with the countries we're closest to on trade deals and who we buy 50% of our products from. And if these countries...
Whoa. Hang on a second.
It is coming with a fact.
Hang on a second. Correct. Wanting to be friendly with our neighbours, wanting to trade with our neighbours, yes and yes. Wanting to be governed by them is a quite different thing, Rupert. I am pro-European, all right? I love Europe. It's a fabulous place. I love the fact there are different countries with their own, cheeses and different ways of life and all the rest of it. What I loathe is the idea it's being centrally governed, like a new form of communism, by unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. That's what I'm against, Rupert. And the idea... I mean, I felt Brexit was a liberation for us. You want us to go back into that?
Yes, exactly. But this is the key.
Why, Rupert? Why do you want to be governed by Mr. Juncker? Why?
Right. So the key bit is that if we have another referendum and we vote to remain, you can't just leave it there, because I promise now, you, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, David Davis, it will just fuel the fire even more, and this growing concept of populism will just get bigger and bigger.
Why do you want to be governed by Mr. Juncker, Rupert?
I'm not only am I a Ramona, I'm a rechanger. I accept the European Union isn't perfect.
Say that again.
At the front, I'd rather be at the front table, trying to engage with the other countries and saying, right, how do we change this? By trying to be, right, we're off, we don't like it, and possibly leading our country into a
Rupert, we've tried for 40 years to change it, and we've lost.
No.
And let me just tell you this, right? There was one moment, Rupert, in my long years there was one moment when the EU could have reformed, and that was when they put together the Constitution, which then became the Lisbon Treaty, all right? And I said at the time, if you use this opportunity to democratise the European Union, to make the European Parliament the place in which the government of the EU sits and where you can make primary legislation, I said you might just find support for this project across Europe. I said I wouldn't support it because you could never defend the national interest. But what did they do, Rupert? The one chance they had to reform all of this, they stuck with what they call the community method, which means the laws are made and held by unelected bureaucrats. Rupert, it's unreformable.
I disagree. And I also believe that, the thing that's bugging me the most in the last 2.5 years since we've had this referendum is how divided this country is. Look, there's a pub across the road from me now. I could walk in there and start a fight with someone by going up to them and going, you voted to leave. How dare you run my country? I voted to remain. We are divided as a nation.
So why do Remainers behave so badly then, Rupert?
Why do Leavers behave so badly?
Well, I'm just asking why you would want to do that.
No, I'm saying
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you.
All right,
Rupert, let me ask you a question quickly. Do you think there's going to be a second referendum?
Oh, yes.
And you actually think you're going to win a second referendum, don't you?
What I said is those 3 parts there. That's the only way we can do another referendum. I'm very concerned if we had another referendum, on the ballot paper it would be Remain or leave on WTO, and I'm very concerned there are enough people out there who can't afford their houses, can't afford their mortgages, can't pay enough to get by, and people will say, let's go for the hard Brexit, where you can be better off.
Absolutely. Proper Brexit. Rupert, you're a star. Thank you for calling. Ben from Chorley says, I say this fatigue is playing into the Remainers' hands to put people in a mindset that they will just accept any old deal, or even worse, accept a second referendum and vote to remain. Ben, this is very much what the Prime Minister's relying on. She's relying on Brexit fatigue. Let's just get this done, and then we leave the European treaties on March the 29th. That's what she's relying on. And I should be happy with that, shouldn't I? The trouble is, the new treaty we're signing up to is in some ways, perhaps, even worse. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:45 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Is Brexit fatigue changing your mind, or do you feel more motivated than ever? Alan on Twitter says, yes, I'm fatigued. It's making me even more anti-EU somehow. But others have a different point of view. One here says, I was an avid leaver. I now just want it resolved. A vote to stay in means I can sell my house and move to Spain. Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Now we get this, you see, on Twitter. We've lots of friends in London, some from places like Italy or Spain, Ukraine who are really worried. Well, don't be worried. We're not a banana republic. Catherine then goes on to say, I was born in England. I'm English. But I love to be able to pop over to France. Catherine, we've been popping over to France a long time before we joined the common market. In fact, before 1914, there was a boat train, a daily train that went from Victoria, boat over, and in those days, you didn't even have to have a passport. The fact we're leaving political union does not mean we can't go to Boulogne for lunch. Let's go to Blackpool. Speak to Andrew, a new caller to the show. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Nigel. Good to speak to you, mate.
Good to speak to you. So are you fatigued, or are you exasperated, or do you think it's going rather well?
I'll tell you what, I'm absolutely exasperated, but it's given me that kick to say we're going to leave the European Union. I've got MS, and before all this business started, I couldn't move out of the chair. Now, as soon as Theresa May and Gove and Hammond and all those come on with a Byland and a load of rubbish, I'm out of that chair, shouting at the television. No way.
You're joking, really?
No, too right. I tell you what, I used to look after Frank Carson, the comedian. Who was
I knew Frank well. Yeah.
Great UKIP supporter.
He was.
Unfortunately, he died before the referendum.
Yeah.
I went into the booth, and the referendum, leave the EU, looked up and said, Frank, that's for you. And I can't believe what's going on. We knew that politicians were treacherous, and we knew that they had contempt for the electorate. But this, they can't hide it.
No, well, I love the thought that you're sort of able to move about better despite being an MS sufferer.
I couldn't jump up before. Now.
You're really... Frank Carson, he said to me, he said, can I speak at the UKIP conference? I said, look, Frank, you're a stand-up comedian. I love you. But, this is politics, and it could go wrong. Oh, no, he said, you can trust me. I'll just tell one... I'll welcome them all up here to Southport. I'll tell one little joke. I said, well, don't let me down. He stands up and says, I'm from Northern Ireland. He says, do you know the problem with Northern Ireland? He says, there are too many Catholics. And I start thinking, oh, my goodness me. He says, there are too many Protestants and not enough Christians. So he didn't let me down, Andrew, did he?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because I think he was right. Andrew,
it was on the button. But
Andrew, I love the call.
Fine for me to leave. I'm fine for Frank to leave as well.
Well, I love the call, and keep in touch. Call us again, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there we are. Somebody with MS who's so infuriated he says he's getting up out of his chair. Let's go to Durham and speak to Chris, a new caller. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
Well, I'm not fatigued. I'm just blooming angry, that's all, Chris, and I'm...
Well, I was going to say the same thing, that not only am I very cheesed off with what's been happening over the last couple of years, but I am furious.
Yeah.
I know you know that the hierarchy in the EU are a bunch of swindlers, but I didn't expect the government to be.
Well, actually, Chris, you could put an argument here that says that Mr. Barnier is a very clever man. He believes in building a United States of Europe.
Sure.
He doesn't want anyone to leave. He therefore fiendishly used the Irish border issue, got Mrs. May to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and run to Brussels to meet a deadline.
Sure.
The problem is she was stupid enough to sign up to it.
I don't think it's stupidity.
You think this is deliberate?
I'm not trying to be smart, but I won't go into a long story, but I made a living out of reading people, and I was in the financial area like you in the City of London, and my business depended upon understanding people and knowing the way they worked.
Yeah.
Seriously, the first day that I saw Theresa May and she spoke, I thought, we can't have that.
Oh, really?
There is a weakness there. I acknowledge that. But there's also something more sinister.
Interesting. Do you think she'll survive next week, Chris?
Sorry?
Do you think she'll survive next week?
I think we are dealing with powers that... you know the power of the EU.
Well...
we're dealing with powers there that can fix just about anything.
Powers in the EU and the powers behind the EU, and they're powerful and they're strong. But, Chris, my view, and I've said it before a dozen times here, but my view, Chris, is, on the big picture of this, that the genie is out of the bottle. It's not going to get put back. And even if, in the worst-case scenario, they force us to vote again in another referendum, that we're going to have an even bigger Leave vote. That is my view.
Well, on the subject of that, I wish people would stop talking about another vote, because it's just waffle and it doesn't achieve anything. We need a solution.
We do. Chris, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating. Chris reads people and didn't trust Mrs May much from the start. No fatigue at all. It's only just starting. Only when Parliament votes down Mrs May's deal will the French and German exporters insist their governments make concessions to allow them to sell their goods to the UK without tariff. Matthew, you're right, but it won't happen in the space of a couple of days. ITV announcing breaking news that it scrapped plans to host a TV debate between Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn on Sunday. The BBC have also cancelled theirs. Isn't this pathetic? That our leaders say we need to have debates. And when the chance to have a debate between the two of them comes along, they both somehow manage to make sure that it can't happen. Mind you, the debate would have been pointless, wouldn't it, really? Corbyn leading a Remain party and Theresa May a Remainer. There wouldn't have been a leaver there. But I do think it's very weak of both of them not to come to some agreement over this. Jamie is calling from Bath and is another new caller to this show. Jamie, good evening.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Now, are you sick to the back teeth of this Brexit debate, Jamie?
I am, and the thing is this, it was on the news, and you probably haven't seen it yet, but the Chief Whip was just on, and he said he's confident 100% that May's deal will go through next week.
Really?
Yeah.
Does that make him...
So what do they know that we don't know?
Does that make him a genius, Jamie, or does it make him a fool?
Apparently he's been talking to all the MPs, on almost like a case-by-case basis to convince them.
Yes.
And he said it was a hard slog uphill, but he's confident that the deal will go through.
Well, I tell you what he has had, Jamie, today. He's had a Liberal Democrat MP, Stephen Lloyd, for Eastbourne, who's resigned the Lib Dem whip and is going to vote with the government. So he's certainly got one there. And he might find there are some Labour people, northern constituencies, Midlands constituencies, with big Leave votes who think by supporting the deal, at least we leave. But beyond that, Jamie, I mean, on all the numbers and what people have said in public, it looks like she's losing this by about 80 votes.
It looks like it, but you and I know what they tell us and what's reality is two different things.
Yeah. I remember, Jamie, 25 years ago, Maastricht Treaty, up to 100 Conservative MPs saying they opposed it, and in the final analysis, they were whittled away to nothing, particularly using a motion of confidence. So Jamie, what do you think's going to happen then?
I think that it's gonna go. I think it will go through. Because they continually lie to us, and obviously everything can't be trusted. But with regards to the second referendum, they're already talking now that the question should be either accept Mrs May's deal or remain. So that ties in with what I've just said about it going through next week. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. It's not impossible, but Jamie, if that was the choice in the referendum, I honestly think, as somebody who's fought hard for this, all his adult life, I couldn't even vote in that referendum.
Well, look, it's even worse, Nigel, because who do we vote for?
Yeah.
We can't even vote for UKIP anymore.
Well, that's a separate gap. UKIP still exists, by the way. But Jamie, that's obviously comes down to parties. But if the referendum was Remain or Mrs May's deal, I'm certain I'd boycott it. Thank you very much indeed for your call, Jamie. Loads of you wanted to speak. I'm sorry. What I found tonight was there wasn't too much Brexit fatigue. I'll finish up with Paul from Bristol, who said, I voted to Remain in the 2016 referendum. I'm absolutely disgusted by the way the EU have treated my country during these negotiations. If I get a chance to vote again, I will definitely vote to get out. I've had enough of them. Well, do you know something? I think there's a lot of people